Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. On the Move, East Africa's Great Migration, presented by Pietro Luraschi. Pietro has been guiding for NatHab in East Africa since 2015, and today he's joining us from Italy. So thanks for being with us today, Pietro. I'll hand it over to you.
Hello to everybody. Thank you for taking your time to listen to me. I'm Pietro. I've been guiding in East Africa for the last 17 years, and I'm guiding for NatHab since 2015. I'm a specialized walking safari guide, and I do mainly guide training and private guiding now. So we are here all together now to talk about the wildebeest migration, which is one of the greatest shows on Earth. To understand the migration, we have first to understand where the migration occurs and what is the environment and the ecosystem that holds that many wildebeest. The ecosystem is obviously the Serengeti ecosystem and is composed of several protected areas. The Serengeti is by far the most famous. As you can see here, is around 14,000 square kilometers, and from south to north is around probably 250 kilometers, as a kind of an odd shape, and goes from very different habitats from the foothills of Ngorongoro hills all the way to Maasai Mara. The second part of this ecosystem is the Maasai Mara National Reserve and the Mara Triangle, which are in Kenya. That line you see from left to right is the border between Kenya and Tanzania. Maasai Mara Game Reserve is a very famous protected area, totally dedicated to tourism, to photographic tourism, as Serengeti is. So no hunting is allowed. This area is the farthermost north and farthermost area of the entire ecosystem. We have then Ngorongoro Conservation Area to the south. Is a big area, is around 8,000 square kilometers, and is divided into two. The southern part is basically highlands, elevated mountains, volcanic mountains, and the northern part is open plains. Also, this area is totally dedicated to photographic tourism. The only difference is that here, Maasai people, which is the traditional tribe that used to live here, is allowed to live and in their traditional way. So basically, as cattle herders. We have then the Loliondo game controlled area, which is the area to the east. It is an area that is not only for photographic tourism. Some concession, some land is dedicated to photographic tourism. Some land is dedicated to hunting, and is also a place where Maasai freely live. To the southwest, we have Maswa Game Reserve that used to be a hunting ground. Right now is being converted to tourism and is as well fully protected. To the northwest, there is Grumeti Game Reserve. It's also an interesting story. It was a hunting block and has been taken by Tudor Jones, which is an American very wealthy person that took the Grumeti Game Reserves and the Ikorongo Game Reserves to preserve this spectacle that is the migration. Now, we have seen this entire environment is around probably 33,000 square kilometers. So it's a huge land, and but is very important in every corner for the wildebeest migration. Let's see now what create the reasons for the migration. Obviously, the wildebeest migrate for a reason. They move all these kilometers because they are in need of something. And there are some geographical features that define and creates these reasons. So let's see what are the four main factors that influence the migration. First is the Rift Valley escarpment. Second is the Oldonyo Lengai, which is the only active volcano left in Tanzania. Then there is the Lake Victoria, and then there are the rivers in the northwest of the ecosystem. Let's go now to see one by one how these geographical features influence the migration. The Great Rift Valley is a fracture in the African tectonic plate that goes basically from Syria all the way to Malawi. Is a divergent fracture, so basically the continent is separating into. This creates in Tanzania a big wall on the west of the Rift Valley. This wall is 700-meter tall, and obviously being a fracture, the fracture created a lot of volcanic activity. This volcanic activity started around 4.5 million years ago, and formed the Ngorongoro Islands are between 2.5 to 1.9 million years ago. Imagine the Ngorongoro is now an extinct volcano, and basically what we see is a caldera, so it's a collapsed volcano that probably was more than 4,500 meters above sea level. Now it still reaches on the rim around 2,300 meters above sea level. So it's a huge wall that separates the sea, basically, from the Serengeti. Why I say the sea? Because the prevailing wind in Tanzania are easterly winds, so blow from the sea inland. When they pass all the area before the Rift Valley, they are basically on the same level. When they hit the wall of the Rift Valley, they are forced up. The air loses the capacity of holding water, and it rains. It rains obviously on the western side of the Ngorongoro Highlands, and these Ngorongoro Islands create basically a rain shadow on the other side of the mountain. The other side of these islands is the Serengeti. So the wet, the humid winds from the sea drop all their humidity before reaching the Serengeti, at least throughout all the dry season. The second factor is the Oldonyo Lengai. The Oldonyo Lengai is this, as we say, the only remaining active volcano in Tanzania, was born around 800,000 years ago, and the last eruption was in 2008. When it erupts, obviously the ashes are blown towards the east, and so, as you can see here, towards the Serengeti National Park, all the way here. So, being blown to towards the Serengeti, it deposits a great amount of ashes that are very rich in minerals. The Oldonyo Lengai is the only volcano in the world that has a high concentration of carbonatites, so basically very rich in minerals like calcium carbonate, like potassium, like sodium. So very rich ash that get deposited in the Serengeti. Then there is Lake Victoria. As we talked about the first two features, these two features influenced a lot the southern part of Serengeti. Lake Victoria, which is an enormous body of water, is 68,800 square kilometers of water surface, influences a lot the weather in the northern part of Serengeti. The northern part of the ecosystem is much more rainy because of this, and rain comes also when in the rest of the country is a very dry season. The last feature is obviously the rivers that are created by the Lake Victoria Basin, which are the Mbalageti, the Grumeti, the Mara River. All these rivers are, as you can see, on the western part of the Serengeti and in the north. And these are the only major river that holds water throughout all the years. So what happens here? What is the result of all this? The result is that the wildebeest move throughout this region, and the movement are dictated by certain, basically, nutrients in the grass. So let's see the timing of the migration. When we talk about January, February, and March, the wildebeest are mostly in the southern part of Serengeti. It's what is called the short grass plains. It goes basically from Namiri and Pi and Liondo all the way down to Ndutu, all the way down to Maswa. This area, as you can see on the right, just outside the green part, there is a small dot. That's the Ondonyo Lengai. So the ashes from the Ondonyo Lengai were all deposited in this area. Consider that in Ndutu, for example, the deposit of ash is as deep as 16 meters. So this ash has a lot of different minerals, especially in this area, iron, magnesium, calcium, and nitrogen, and that makes the grass of this area extremely nutrient. What is the problem of this area is that there is no permanent water, and the only permanent water in Lake Ndutu and Lake Masek is so alkaline that animals cannot drink it. So animals cannot stay here in the dry season. There is not enough water to sustain the great number of wildebeest. Why do wildebeest come here? They come here because this mineral, especially phosphorus, which is another mineral very present in this land, is vital for the calving. Wildebeest reach this area during these 3 months, more or less, something more maybe, when it's wet, because there is water, and the water allows them to stay in the better pastures for the cows to grow strong. The milk of the cow becomes much richer when they are in this area because of the nutrients, obviously. All this area is a short grass plains, as we say, because most of the time, what happens, the grass is eaten before the flowers can seed. So this grass mostly spread by vegetative way, so with rhizome and stolons, and creates basically a mat of grass all over the land. In the next months, what happens is that the wildebeest moves slightly up towards, this is a classic scene of on the short grass plain where wildebeest are spread. There is rains in the clouds. The next move is towards the western corridor. Here, wildebeest are more on the move. They moved into this area basically because there is permanent water. So when the water is drying up in the southern plains, they need water, and they tend to go up towards north. The thing is, in the Grumeti area, in the western corridor and the Grumeti area, there is also very rich soil. In the Ndabaga plain on the west, which is an old Pleistocene alluvial plain, there is a high quantity of mineral, especially copper, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. And this makes this area probably the richest area in the entire Serengeti. Said so, this area is so muddy in the wet season that wildebeest cannot really access this area because they would get stuck, it would be too tiring, they would be too prone to predation. So they tend to avoid this area during the rains, but as soon as it's drying up a bit, they move up and they feed on this very nutrient grass. In this area, they can stay several months, April, May, June, and this is their rutting season. So wildebeest the males start trying to herd females, keep females together. Normally, the males stay in front of the herd. They stop, they find territories, they hold their territories, waiting females to move through. Territories can last 15 minutes, can last days, even weeks, depending on where the wildebeest are moving. Obviously, a territory is completely useless if the wildebeest are on the move, because the female will not stop. So territories are made and left, made and left, always trying to have the resting time with the female. In the case a female gets into estrus and the male can mount her. So after this rutting, which is quite a sensational view, because the wildebeest are on the move, the wildebeest are going, there is big lines of wildebeest, then they stop, rest, they move again, and there is constant noise of the males calling with their typical like rutting hum. Is a constant like and the sound is really astonishing. From here, they tend to go north. So let's see first this picture. You see now wildebeest are going on straight lines. They are marching really towards their targets. Then they go up north in the Kogatende area, the Lamai Wedge, across the Mara River, and then the Mara in Kenya. This is a much less nutrient land. If before we were talking about a clay soil, here is all the nutrient deprived granitic soil, very old soil that doesn't hold a lot of nutrients. Manganese and zinc are the main minerals here, but the main problem is that the granitic soil let the nutrients go. The interesting thing here is that the wildebeest keep going up and down in this area, and they move following the rains. We said before, the rains come from Lake Victoria. There is more rain here. There is rain when it's dry season in the south, so it's more difficult. It's easier for wildebeest to get what they need. What they need is basically fresh grass and water. The grass is tall already when they reach there and is drying. When the grass dries, all the nutrients are sent back to the roots. So the dry grass is not very nutrient. So wildebeest rely on two things in this area. They rely on fire, normally man-made fire, and they rely on the rain, occasional rain that comes through the dry season from Lake Victoria. So fire, all this area is a fire-driven environment. Cushitic tribes started burning these lands for herding their cows 4,000 years ago. Maasai went on doing the same, and that basically keeps the grassland open and gives out of season growth of grass that is full of nutrients and not like all the dry grass. From the north, they stay quite a lot. July, August, September, October, sometimes they come early June, but here is crossing land. So the wildebeest tend to go north, tend to go to the Mara and the Lamai Wedge. To do that, they either have to cross the Mara River or his tributary, which is the Sand River. Doing that, the Sand River is most of the time dry. The Mara River has normally a lot of water, and so the mighty crossing occurred during this time of the year. We will have time to talk about this a bit later. So this is an example of a crossing, the chaotic scene, wildebeest panicking, frantic run through the water. From this area in the north, they normally come straight down to Lobo and this area all the way to the south and back to Ndutu again. Now let's have a look to this. You see, we have from left the Ndutu area, then going north to the Western Corridor. From the Western Corridor, again north to the Kogatende and Northern Serengeti area, and then down from Lobo in the northern, from the north to the east and down to the center of Serengeti. As you can see, if you put together these four maps, you have a map that basically covers the entire ecosystem from Maswa and Ngorongoro in the south, Loliondo in the east, Mara in the north, Grumeti on the west. The only part that is really left out of this area is the Ngorongoro Highlands, because wildebeest from the Serengeti don't venture up there. So we say that where the wildebeest are during the season, in which area and which other area depending on the month. But let's see the routes they take to move in this area. So if you look different colors, the blue is for wildebeest when they are in the south, the red when they are in the west, north is green, yellow is when they come down from Lobo into central Serengeti. So normally wildebeest, what they do, they don't go straight up. If they were only following the rains, they would go straight up, but they don't. They go to the west because of that Ndabaka Plains and because of the highly nutrients area there, but also because of the permanent rivers. When they go up, they may cross the Mara River once and come back from the Sand River. They may go towards the Seronera area. They may go towards Piaya. So there is several. This is the classic one that you will see printed in every brochure. You can have other kind of routes. For example, you can have a route that goes more into the Western Corridor, that goes through Rumeti, through Ikorongo, that cross the Mara, going to Kenya more than once, that goes straighter down to central Serengeti, and then goes down south-south in Ngorongoro Conservation Area, in Ndutu, all the way to basically the slopes of the Ngorongoro Conservation Area and the Ngorongoro Highlands. Or sometimes you can have them avoiding the Western Corridor, going more straight up, and then crossing again, coming down, maybe going to the east towards Piaya and staying quite north in the Kusini area. Or again, they can go straight up, going to the north, crossing several times the river, going back to the Western Corridor and Rumeti Game Reserve, going up again, and you see a very random kind of path. What this says to us that if you put all these maps together, you will result with a quite complicated spaghetti-like circuit where you can see that wildebeest in different years can cover different kind of areas. Not only in different years, but we are talking about of 1,500,000 wildebeest that are normally divided in different herds. So there is herds that can take one route, another herd can take another route. So it's kind of predictable the area where they are. It's not totally predictable when they will be there exactly and how many they will be in that kind of area throughout that time. But several herds take several routes. As you can see here, this is an exemplification. This is northern Serengeti, is the Lamai Wedge. You can see it's a single herd, some 100 animals, and you can see that they are already dividing in smaller herds. This is not what really happens when the big herds are there, but can give you an idea of how they can spread through the land, and then different heads take different directions. So this is how it works, more or less. See, if you look at a Serengeti map again, and we can kind of summarize what we were talking about, is more or less like this. The south is richer in minerals, perfect for calving, but doesn't have enough water. So wildebeest come here in the wet season. They come here when they calve, because they have a very strict peak calving season, which lasts around 2 weeks between the end of January and the first weeks of February. And basically around 450,000 wildebeest are born during this time. It's very important to synchronize this birth, because it's very important for them to be born in the same period. And basically 90% and more of the wildebeest that are born out of this window are predated, because they are scarce. There is plenty of predators, thousands of hyenas, lions, etc. So all the wildebeest that are born out of this window normally die. The only ones that survive are the ones that are in this And obviously, why they survive? Because if you have 400,000, 450,000 wildebeest born in the same period, there is not enough lions or hyenas that can make a dent into this number. From here, you see, they go up to the western corridor because it's still a very rich area that they can only reach when it's drying up. Here they are rutting, they mate, and then 242 average days later, the wildebeest are born back. From here, when it dries up, they need to move because they already eaten all the grass and there is not enough rain coming down. So they move to the north. There is more rain, the soil is much less rich, the grass is much less palatable, but still they have the advantage of having constant water. Every week, every 2 weeks, there is some water, new grass comes out, nutrient grass, because they are fresh shoots. From here, when the times come, start raining in the south, the wildebeest start following the rains to be ready to calve again in the new tour. This is basically a panoramic of what happens in the migration. Let's focus now a bit of what happens when they are up north, which is one of the places that most of us likes to be, to look at, to watch the famous crossing. This is a crossing. This is crossing number 5 in Tanzania on the southern shore of the Mara River. So wildebeest need to cross. Don't think that wildebeest will cross only once. Wildebeest may cross never in 1 year or may cross several times in 1 year, depending of which herd, depending which wildebeest, depending what happened to the wildebeest. So they always move one side or the other side of the Mara River or the Sand River, following the rains. They see rains one side, they tend to move that side because they know that fresh grass will grow. Here is the Mara River. Okay, the Mara River comes from the Mau forest, the Mau escarpment, goes basically north-south in Kenya and veers off to the west in Tanzania, going towards Lake Victoria. So obviously the crossing in the Mara happens normally west-east or east-west. In Tanzania happen north-south and south-north. There is several crossing points. What we mean with crossing points, and you can see in the picture in the bottom left, wildebeest have some areas where they cross and some areas where they don't cross. When they cross, they make big, basically dents in the bank, and they cross in that areas because for them are the safer place to cross. So is probably around 20 crossing points between the two countries, and wildebeest always use them, always use the same crossing. Obviously, some herd one day will use one crossing, the next day may use another crossing, but the number of crossing is basically that. What are the dangers now that wildebeest face into a crossing? First danger that we can consider is confusion. Now, confusion, wildebeest get lost. So you see calves, you see the picture on top, there is a wildebeest on the right. Alone is a calf, is at that point probably in August, he would be 6 months old, 5 to 6 months old, and he needs his mother still. So they often get lost, get separated from the mothers, and often becoming prey to lions, hyenas, leopards, and cheetahs. The confusion is great. The sound is impressive. They run down the bank, the dust, and the confusion is so great that often there are herds of calves that remain one side with mothers the other side. They cross back. They can become quite a disaster. The other problem wildebeest have is the exit path. You can see wildebeest coming out from the bank on the top picture, and you can see how their path are on the bottom picture. So when there is a big number of wildebeest and the water is all the way to the bank, it's difficult for them to get out. They trample each other, they often die. The next danger is rocks. Obviously, hoofs are not made for climbing, and slippery rocks can be very dangerous. They can break legs, they can get stuck, is a massive problem. They tend to avoid rocks, as you can see in the picture on top, but sometimes the pressure is so high that they try to go through the rocks, and there is underwater rocks. That's a big danger that they face every time. Crocodile is another one, and crocodile is a much bigger danger for calves than for adult. This adult that you are looking at in the picture actually survived, managed to get out from the water, leaving the croc behind. Next danger again is water. Water is problematic because of the current. As you can see in the bottom picture, wildebeest are starting in one spot, but the water is dragging them down, dragging them in places where they don't want to be, and in places where maybe they would struggle to go out. Next danger again is numbers. As you see, and this number of wildebeest creates such a mass that wildebeest start pushing into each other. They get panic, basically. They trample one over the other. They get stuck in mud. They get submerged by water, and they very easily drown. Let's look now at what is the progression of a crossing, which is always fun. And I will do that through some Swahili words that are used by guides to describe what is happening. The first word that I'm going to use is kukusanya. When the wildebeest, we say the wildebeest kukusanya means they are assembling, they are gathering together, they are getting from different herds coming to the same spot. And here is a good example. So this is what you have to expect. From the back, they try to go forward. From forward, they move backwards. The cacophony of sounds grows because they don't know what to do. They want to cross, they are afraid, they are excited, and they make these noises to get themselves brave enough to jump in. And this is quite an exciting moment for a guide and for a guest, because it's the moment when you get set and you get ready to experience something unique. Then is the moment when everything starts. No, we say kutumbukia. Kutumbukia in Swahili means to drop down. So wildebeest start dropping from the bank. When they start dropping from the bank, means that it's very likely that the crossing is going to happen. Not sure yet, because they can always change their mind and go up, but quite likely. And then is the moment where you get really super excited and you are waiting, and like you become quite anxious to predicting what's going to happen. And then there is kupigamaji. Kupigamaji means to hit the water. When the wildebeest start crossing, then all hell breaks loose. The chaos is incredible. The movement is incredible. The dust, the splashing, the sound of the wildebeest themselves is an incredible show. Like the energy start flowing through the wildebeest and through us that are watching, and the wildebeest start coming out the other side, and it's quite a show. As you can see in this picture, like this is a crossing called Kisimani. You can see they come down from the bank, they hit rocks, they have to avoid the rocks. There is different branches of wildebeest that are coming in, deep water, shallower water, and then they come out, and you see they are all wet, they are all hyper excited, and it's beautiful. You see, sometimes you see all the wildebeest are there, and then almost already in the water, and then one start moving forward and then drags the entire herd behind. Look at this picture again. You see, here is when we said before, no, different line of wildebeest coming, different is the same herd, but different wildebeest start crossing, and then it creates different lines, different rows. Look at this again. This is a quite an easy crossing, not very dangerous. Why I'm saying that? Very shallow water. The number is huge, is spectacular, but no casualties in a crossing like this. Why no casualties? Because wildebeest, because crocodiles will stay far from a herd this big. The chance to be trampled is too high. Water is not deep enough to sweep them away, and so they can calmly run through and calmly go up the next bank. This is a more chaotic crossing. You see water is deeper, the bank is steeper, so there is a lot of jumping. Jumping is always dangerous, even if wildebeest are very strong animals. And then the crossing goes with different lines. Wildebeest try to get close to the shore to avoid deeper water, but at some point they have to get into deeper water, and that's where they increase their speed, where the jumping is the best. So basically, what is cool of a crossing is the quest for a herd, is the hope that the crossing is going to happen, is the expectation, is the wait, is a building of potential energy that bursts into kinetic when the first beasts start crossing. It's really fun. You may wait hours for a crossing. I have been waiting like 9 hours for a crossing, or sometimes I have been waiting 15 minutes. But to be honest, the crossing I prefer is the crossing where you have to wait a bit, maybe 1 hour, maybe 1 hour and a half, a couple of hours before the crossing happens, because there is where you really understand what the wildebeest are doing. You understand the herd mentality, you understand the movement inside the herd, the resting, and then the sudden burst of energy, and then the fear, and then the excitement, the desire to cross, the fear to cross, and all this is what then makes the crossing more rewarding. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about today, and so I'm happy to hear what you have to say now.
Great. Thank you so much, Pietro. That was fascinating. We do have questions for you. First, I'd like to remind everyone that if you have questions for Pietro, you can submit them in the questions field in the control panel. So by far, the most popular question for you is, I'm going to combine a couple actually. When is the best time to see the migration? And more specifically, when is the best time to see river crossings?
Okay, the best time to see migration is difficult to say. The most, I would say, the highest probability is either January, February, March in the south, or July, August, September in the north, because it's where wildebeest are more predictable and where they stay the longest without marching away. For crossings, I would say definitely August and September are the best months.
Okay, great. Do wildebeest have a leader? How do they know what route to take?
No, they don't have a leader. Basically, imagine, like, we are talking of 1,500,000 wildebeest. So there is not a single leader. Like a wildebeest starts moving, the second wildebeest following makes the third wildebeest following, and then without noticing, you have a herd of 1,000 following that movement. So there is no leaders. There is no, for a crossing, I've seen crossing where a young calf was, a 6-month calf was the first jumping into the water. So no, there is no leader. And imagine, like, probably in the early 1900s, there were a lot of wildebeest. Then rinderpest came. In the 60s, there were maybe only 250,000 wildebeest. In 77, there were 1,300,000. Now we are more than 1,500,000. So it's not a single herd. It's several herds made of female and calves and males, and each herd moves following one random wildebeest that moves in the right time where others want to follow.
Great. Do other wildlife like zebra or antelope also migrate with the wildebeest? Yes,
zebras do. Thomson gazelle, elands, topi, they all migrate in the ecosystem. Slightly different from wildebeest. Zebra are the ones that have the most similar pattern.
Okay, and do predators follow the migration?
Most predators like lions, leopards, and like hyenas are territorial, so they cannot really follow the migration. There may be some non-territorial male lion, some lion that is not strong enough to hold the territory, some nomadic one that may follow the migration for a bit, but not to great extent of distance. So they normally don't. With the lions and hyenas, like feed on what they can, just waiting for the wildebeest to pass through their territories.
Interesting. Can you repeat the number of calves that are born in January and February?
Around 450,000.
Wow, it's amazing.
It's a big number. It's basically 90% of the females get pregnant.
Oh, wow. And what's the gestation period for wildebeests?
142 days average, around 8 months.
So with this unpredictability of the migration, how does NatHab monitor things to ensure that guests are in the best place possible to view?
In the NatHab safaris, mostly run in June, and in June we normally go to the Western Corridor, which is a quite reliable place as well, because as we said before, is the most nutrient area in the entire Serengeti and only accessible at the beginning of the dry season. So June is a very good moment to be there. Then we normally are July, August, September, we are all up north where the crossing happens, and again January and February and March we are in the south. So we follow what where the wildebeest are in the macro area, and then during a day game drive you can always reach where they are if they are not exactly around your tent.
Okay. I'm going to combine a couple questions from folks. There was a traveler who was looking forward to a Mara crossing last fall, and she noticed that the wildebeest would come to the river and look like they were about to cross, and then they would turn away. So how do they communicate with each other about when is a good time to cross the river and whether or not to do so at all?
It's not about communication. The communication, like when they approach the river, can be because they just want to eat greener grass. As you can also see in this picture, on this lowest bank of the river, there is quite a lot of green grass. So they can approach the river for that reason, but if it is a different demeanor. When they want to cross, they arrive with a bit of anxiety. Is what we call that kuninginia verb in Swahili, which means to hang. So you see they are restless, they are not at ease. Some want to cross, but they don't dare. So the communication is there is a lot of calling, a lot of sounds. But that's not enough to tell let's cross. It's always one. It's always one that at some point decides to go and gets into that water and start crossing. And the other is a herd mentality. He is going, better I do before I get left behind. So they all start going. But it's very possible that the same one that was ready to jump gets a fright, maybe a croc, maybe a log, just that is confusing for a croc, and then turns back, runs up the bank, and the entire herd will follow.
Amazing. So people are really curious about the population of wildebeest and how, with so many calves being born every year, how the population is able to keep in check and balanced.
The population increased a lot in the last 100 years after the rinderpest. Now we probably kind of reached a sort of carrying capacity of the land. So it's always like this in nature. When population is growing, there is a lot of food for everybody. So there is a lot of very high rate of survival. and the population keeps growing, at some point there is not enough food for everybody and the population weakens, and then there is a lower survival rate. Obviously, predation is one of the things, like thousands of hyenas, probably 3,000 hyenas, 2,000 lions, I don't know how many, leopards, cheetahs, etc. They all feed on wildebeest culls. But there is also a lot of deaths that come from the long treks, that come from the crossing, from the crocodiles, lots that come from diseases, and a lot more than come from not having enough food. So if there is good rain, then the survival rate is high. If there is not enough rain, a lot of wildebeest will die. So it's the environment itself that keeps the number at bay.
Mm-hmm. Lots of factors. And people are really curious about whether we know what the average lifespan of a wildebeest is.
The average lifespan of a wildebeest, let me double check not to say something stupid.
Never.
I think it should be around 15-20 years, if I'm not wrong.
And there was a question about when calves get separated from their mothers during crossings, do the calves go ahead and try to cross without their mothers, or do the mothers come back and try to get back to their calves?
Like when wildebeest are born, normally is the smell, which is the first, the most important recognition way. When later on, when is the sound, that sound counts a lot. So the wildebeest calf call, the mother call, and they try to get together again. Obviously, if the mother is one side and the calf is the other side, can be a bit more of a problem, but very often they get lost. At this age, they may survive anyway, because they're normally around 6 months, but it's not always so.
Okay, and I think this will be the last question of the day. Are there any wildebeest tracking studies? Are they collared or anything?
They have been collared throughout the years. There has been a lot of research project in Serengeti collaring wildebeest and following their routes. That's how we know how many kilometers they do, how we know how much they can walk. If you consider that from north to south is around 350 kilometers from Ngorongoro Conservation Area to Maasai Mara, so it would be like 700 kind of trek if they were going up and down straight, like 650, 700 kilometers of migration. But collared wildebeest demonstrated that can be 1,500 up to 2,500 kilometers the migration, so much longer than a straight walk up and down.
That's amazing. All right, that was the last question we had time for today. So Pietro, I'll hand it back to you for some closing comments.
So my closing comment is, remember one thing, especially this time, wildlife and the migration needs you, conservation needs you to come and see these places, to enjoy these emotions, and to spread the conservation belief. So I invite everybody to come in safari, come and see a crossing, come and see the migration. Is something that will never leave your heart.
Well, thank you so much, Pietro, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Be sure to join us on Monday for our next Daily Dose of Nature. And we did record today's presentation, so we'll get that replay out to you soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Thanks again, Pietro. Goodbye, everybody.